So we've had several clients reach out to us thinking about purchasing a home here in San Antonio. And the number one question they always ask is, what other fees are associated with purchasing a home here in San Antonio? Well, one fee in particular is going to be your HOA fees. Now in this video, we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, the pros and cons about HOAs here in San Antonio.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting topic, so make sure you stay tuned. Alright, so jumping right into it, we are first going to be talking about the pros to HOAs. And I know what y'all are thinking, are there any pros to HOAs? And believe it or not, there are. And the first one is going to be the amenities.
Now, neighborhoods associated with HOAs tend to have more amenities. Amenities such as swimming pools, basketball courts, playgrounds, and sometimes even tennis courts.
Now, not every neighborhood in San Antonio is gonna have a mandatory HOA. You're gonna find that some of the older neighborhoods in the city don't have any HOAs at all, or they have an optional HOA. Now, the neighborhoods that don't have any HOAs, you're not really gonna find amenities in those neighborhoods, right? And the ones that have optional HOAs, and you may find just like a small park or jogging trails, but the neighborhoods that have the larger, nicer amenities, those are going to be in HOAs, just because that is what those HOA fees pay for. And that is something that we will get into a little later in the video.
Right, now one thing you'll also find with a lot of new construction homes and new construction neighborhoods are going to be the amenities. It's going to be far and few in between that you may find neighborhoods that are new and upcoming without HOAs. That's just the way it's going, really.
It's just really the norm now.
Right, so if you are in fact looking for neighborhoods without HOAs, you're definitely going to want to look at older neighborhoods. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, my wife Alyssa and I are licensed real estate agents here in the state of Texas and a husband and wife team. So if you're thinking of relocating to San Antonio, whether that be for work or just looking for a change of scenery, we would love to assist you guys in any way we can and just be a resource of information for you. So feel free to reach out to us with the information on the screen with a phone call, text, or email, and we would love to help. Now let's get back to it.
Now the next pro is going to be property value. And HOAs, they do have rules and regulations that really do require the homes in the neighborhood, the homes' exteriors, to be well maintained and well kept. And that really does play a factor in the property values in the neighborhood.
Right, and it is common for some neighbors to receive a letter in the mail if their trash cans aren't behind cover, or if they haven't cut their grass in quite some time and they're letting the weeds grow, they will get notified about that. Now on to that about property value, let's say you're listing your home on the market and you have it just right. You have a well-manicured lawn, you have everything just right for that listing to go live. Someone gets a showing, they pull up to your house and they see your neighbors that have high weeds, unmanicured lawns. Well, they may have hesitation. So it is a love-hate relationship when it comes to HOAs. I know Alyssa and I are actually part of a neighborhood that does have HOAs. So it does have the good and bad, especially when it comes to property value, like Alyssa's saying. Now to zoom out for just one moment, think about the whole neighborhood in total, right? So it's not just you in particular that may be getting picked on for not putting your trash cans in, it's the whole neighborhood. So it's an experience going into a neighborhood if someone's looking to move there, and everybody in the whole neighborhood has well-manicured lawns and so on and so forth. So it does have its positives, it does have its pros of having an HOA within your community, especially when it comes to property values. Now let's move on to the next pro, which is going to be community engagement.
Yes, HOAs may hold community events such as community garage sales, maybe neighborhood night outs where you kind of just gather and meet your neighbors, and even maybe market days, right? So neighbors, that have small businesses, sometimes they can, congregate on a certain day and showcase their small businesses. HOAs really just sometimes put on events like this for the neighborhood. And I'm not sure if this is really an HOA thing or not, but I know some neighborhoods, they even have like social media pages specifically for that neighborhood, like a Facebook page, let's say. Now, I'm not sure if this is something that an HOA would start, or maybe just a neighbor, right? A neighbor starts that page and kind of brings that community together. And I just feel like within neighborhoods that have HOAs, you really do feel a sense of community.
Right, it's a little bit more camaraderie, if you will, right? And
exactly.
And where do they develop those relationships? Well, sometimes they're going to be at HOA meetings. Now, when you look up on Google, what's the positives about having an HOA and having meetings? Well, you're gonna find a lot that they usually argue during those meetings, but when it all said and done, there is a sense of camaraderie. There is a sense of, well, it's our neighborhood, this is what we'd like to do. And then, people within the community actually do things upon themselves to get things organized, which is why you have Alyssa talking about exactly what she's talking about, that engagement, that community, that sense of camaraderie, even like you would find on a team, right? So it's very similar in getting events started within the community. All right, now that we talked a little bit about the pros of HOAs, let's move on and talk about the cons. And we first want to start off by talking about the HOA fees.
Yeah, the HOA fees are going to be probably the number one thing that people are going to dislike about HOAs. And that's really because HOA fees just add to the amount of what homeownership already costs.
Right.
Besides your utilities, your insurance, your mortgage, those HOA fees just kind of pile on top of that.
Now, HOA fees actually vary in price, and it usually comes down to the location of your neighborhood, and it comes down to the amount of amenities that are actually located within your neighborhood. So usually what we're seeing on the market right now is HOA fees are normally around maybe $300 to $500 on the low end, and it could be upwards to about $1,000. And like I said, it comes down to the amount of amenities. We have a neighborhood close around us that it has a small amusement park, if you will, at the entrance of their community. Now they have a slide, they have a big pond, they have basketball courts, tennis courts, they even have walking trails, and the list goes on. But if you're not about the amenities within your neighborhood, because maybe you're planning on putting a pool within your home, outside of your home, actually within your home would actually be really nice, depending on the location. But if that pool is actually going to be built outside of your backyard, then you may not want to have to pay for the HOA fees that consist of a big pool in the entrance of your neighborhood. So you do have to weigh those things out and decide whether or not you want to use those amenities often or just kind of stick to your own home.
And yes, these HOA fees are very disliked, but like Frank said, they really do go towards the amenities in the neighborhood. So if you really like a lot of amenities in your neighborhood, then you can really expect those HOA fees to be on the higher end. But if amenities aren't something that's a priority for you and you're fine with just maybe like a small pool or playground, then you can expect those HOA fees to be a little on the lower end. And besides the amenities, the HOA fees also cover common area maintenance and landscaping in the common areas throughout the neighborhood.
Right, and going back to the conversation I had with our client recently, one thing that I did mention is that these HOA fees are actually base price, right? Now, depending on your community and the engagement that you have, and maybe you want to consider as a community putting gates, maybe turn into a gated community, or putting security features within that neighborhood, such as security cameras on the front entrance along with those gates. Well, just realize that one thing that's going to happen is that it's going to be voted to have those amenities, and your HOA fees may happen to go up because those adjustments that are going to be made to the neighborhoods are going to come out of the fees that the community puts in. So just something to think about.
Speaking of increase in fees, that actually brings us to our next con, which is the fees increase. Now, whether you're paying your HOA fees monthly, quarterly, or yearly, you can almost always expect for those fees to increase, right? Whether it's every year, every other year, there's really going to be no rhyme or rhythm to it. But as long as the community and the neighborhood is still growing and developing, you can almost always expect that those fees will increase. Now, whether that's by a few dollars, by $25, $50, $100, it's really just going to depend on your neighborhood. But that's one thing that is another con that people dislike, is that there's not really a steady amount. They're always subject to change.
Especially if they plan on putting more amenities within that neighborhood that you're not made aware of when you actually first enter the neighborhood, you can look for those fees to actually increase. And one thing about fees, this is probably going on our con number one, but just talk about it here because we are talking about fees. You always want to pay attention when you get into the neighborhood, before you get into the neighborhood, of what your HOA fees are. Now, sometimes, like I said, on the low end, be $300 to $500, and sometimes upwards to $1,000. You could actually be applying for a new home. and they say, oh yeah, no worries, it's actually $25 a month. Well, 25 times 12, right? It gets you up there to the price points that we're discussing. And so it's all about how they articulate the fees in regards to their HOA fees within that neighborhood. Now let's move on to the next con and talk about the limitations you may have as far as freedom when it comes to your exterior improvements.
Yes, HOAs can actually be very strict when it comes to these things, and you pretty much have to ask permission to do anything to the front of your home, the front yard, and even the backyard.
Now that includes such things as staining the exterior part of your fence, also maybe putting in an irrigation system in your front lawn,
or even painting your home or planting a tree in your front yard. You really do have to get the approval of the HOA before you do any of that. If you do it without getting approval and it gets noticed or caught, then they can ask you to remove it. And even if you don't remove it, you can go down a whole rabbit hole with this with HOA. They can even put like a lien on your home if it gets to that point. So you really, that's one thing that people dislike, is just really having to ask permission pretty much.
And get approval to make adjustments on your own home. Right?
Exactly.
In regards to exterior improvements, not long ago, there was actually a Senate bill that was passed that actually reformed a bunch of HOA laws.
Yes, and this bill was passed to try to bring more balance between HOAs and the rights of property owners. But I think that is still really up for debate. One of the things that was passed, or a part of the law, is that you are now able to have fencing around the front of your home. You can, put a gate out there, which, you couldn't before. But one thing is that the HOA still has to approve the type of material used for that gate. So is it really balanced? I think that's really up for debate. So when it really comes down to it, no matter how many Senate bills are passed, I think, the fact of the matter is that property owners are always going to have to ask HOA for permission to do any sort of improvements to the exterior of the home. And that really just goes back to what we were talking about earlier under our property value discussion, was, it's really to maintain the look and the optics of the neighborhood, right? And making sure that everything looks uniformed and well maintained.
Right, and like I said, it's a love-hate relationship when it comes to HOAs, but they do have their pros and they do have their cons. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it is far and few in between that you will find up-and-coming new neighborhoods without them, but the fact of the matter is that they do help out resale value, and they do maintain that property value and keep the optics with the neighborhood, right? So we want to remind you guys that we're licensed real estate agents here in the state of Texas, and a husband and wife team, and we would love to assist you with all of your real estate needs. So we hope you enjoyed this video. We hope you got a lot of insight on what it is when it comes to HOAs. We hope you have a good weekend, and we'll see you guys on the next video.